Welcome back. Okay, so I want to talk about Arizona today. I've talked about Seattle. I've talked about Vancouver. So why not talk about Arizona? A team that we know will not make the playoffs by design. This everything they're going through right now and the rough season they've had. This was all part of the really tough plan to just rip the band-aid off and just make this happen. So this is a team that has been pretty poor throughout most of the season, though the effort has been good over the last, I'll say, 6 8 weeks. And they are positioned to have a really interesting trade deadline and a fascinating offseason, especially at the draft. They have three first round draft picks. They have their own, they have the Colorado Avalanche's first round pick, and they have what will turn out to be the Carolina first round draft pick from Montreal. In the original trade, it was Montreal slash Carolina, either or. The better of the two draft picks was supposed to be the plan, but there's a provision in there that if one of them's top 10, then it's the worst of the two draft picks that you get. So since it's top 10 protected, and we know Montreal's drafting in the top 10, it's safe to say that Carolina's first round pick is the one that will go to the Arizona Coyotes. So they don't have a first round draft pick outside of their own that is likely to be, in the top half of the draft. And that may stay that way, but don't rule out them looking for other first round draft picks and then trying to package those later first round draft picks to move their way up. That can happen at the draft where a team will say, we don't like our options as much for this pick at number, say, 12. So, you get a phone call from Arizona. They really like the guy that's there at 12. And the other team says, fine, we'll take picks 30 and 32 or whatever they are in exchange for 12. And the deal gets done. So we'll see what happens with that. But the Coyotes, I think, are going to have more than just those two draft picks over their own. Round two is where things get really exciting, too, because they have acquired the second round picks of the Islanders, the Flyers, the Sharks, and the Canucks. None of those four teams are likely to make the playoffs this year. And so with all of them below the playoff line, the one that maybe you can look at and say maybe, I think San Jose is the most likely maybe in the bunch. But yeah, so for the Coyotes, they have a bunch of extra draft picks. And they will have likely that's 7 draft picks out of the first 48. So gonna be a lot of Coyote jerseys being worn on that stage. Then from rounds 3 through 6, they only have their own draft pick. They don't have any extras. I would expect that to change at the deadline as well. They don't have a 7th round draft pick. They can add 7th round draft picks. Shouldn't be a problem either. Their cap space at the deadline, $35,077,330 currently, according to Cap Friendly. So a lot of space there, a lot you can do with that. And so look for teams to be calling Arizona if they haven't started already. They will, because the Coyotes are in an excellent position going forward. The real question, of course, with any rebuild isn't just the teardown. The teardown's relatively easy. It's how you build yourself back up. All these extra draft picks will absolutely help in what's supposed to be a stacked draft. So we look at the players on the team. Clayton Keller leads the way in scoring. He is their MVP. There's a reason he's playing in the All-Star game today. 45 games, 17 goals, 21 assists, 38 points. And it was a slow start to the season for anybody scoring on this team, and he has done very well. He signed for $7.1 million per season until 2028. So, yeah, Keller's not going anywhere. He is one of the few players that Arizona's basically said, this is our guy and we're going to stick with him. Phil Kessel, 45 games, 5 goals, 24 assists, 29 points. He's UFA this summer. He, of course, is chasing that Ironman streak as well. And I would expect Kessel to get moved. I'm not sure where, but he will have control over where he goes. I think contending teams will be interested in Kessel because there's the possibility you get him on your team. It could be like Jeff Carter going from LA to Pittsburgh. It could really rejuvenate his career. And when you get into the playoffs, Phil Kessel can be very good in the playoffs. He showed that in Pittsburgh back-to-back years. He can be excellent in the playoffs. So we shall see who picks him up. And could he end up going to a Boston or a Toronto if they can figure out the money? And the money's going to be the big tricky part, right? Shane Gostisbehere. He has taken a contract which looked cumbersome in the offseason through a very good first half of the season for Arizona. He's made that cap hit look reasonable. 45 games played, 8 goals, 20 assists, 28 points. His cap hits $4.5 million, and that extends into next season. So he has term, and I don't think the cap hit is egregious. I think the cap hit's not bad. And again, in the offseason, it didn't look great. But by playing well in Arizona for the first half of the season, arguably being their MVP early on, that definitely changes the narrative. Where now, yeah, if they put Ghost on the market, somebody's going to call. Somebody will look at the points he's produced, the goals he's produced, and for that money, and say, you know what, we could pick him up. For instance, in Vancouver, they've got their blue line is combined for 8 goals. Ghost got 8 of them by himself. So if the Canucks felt like, hey, we're in a position to take a run at it, maybe Ghost would be somebody to pick up. Just throwing that out there, and I say it only because the Canucks are below the line, and yeah, it's very, very unlikely to take place. Lawson Crouse, 44 games, 11 goals, 10 assists, 21 points. One of my favorite members of the Arizona Coyotes. He's a restricted free agent this summer with arbitration rights. I don't think he goes anywhere either. I think he's one of those key guys for them, and I think they know how important he is. Travis Boyd has done what Ghost did, but with Travis Boyd, he's also not making a lot of money. So in 37 games, 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 points. He's a UFA this summer. He won't produce as well anywhere else as he's producing in Arizona right now. He's getting ice time, and he's getting put on the ice in situations he wouldn't get that opportunity to do in, say, a team playing for a team like Pittsburgh or Washington or anything like that. So for Boyd, I think there'll be some interest, but you've got to be aware that you're picking up basically a defensive fourth line guy for most teams. And so, yeah, he's had a great year. I would not be surprised if he was the type of guy who gets rented out at the deadline somewhere else and comes back to Arizona next year. Says, you know what, I really like playing there. They give me an opportunity, and I scored, and that was fun too. Schmaltz, 26 games, 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points for Nick Schmaltz. He makes $5.8 million. That's his cap hit until 2026. I don't think Schmaltz this year has necessarily justified the term and the cap hit. I like Nick Schmaltz a lot, though, so I try to not weigh in on this one too much. But I can't look at that cap hit, look at his production, and say, yeah, that's okay. But Schmaltz, I don't think he's going anywhere either. Johan Larsson could be. 29 games, 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. He's a UFA in 2022. And Larsson, again, he's one of these players that might have been cold early on in the season for Arizona. He's been very good lately. And so he will attract some interest. And again, it's all about let's get some more draft picks. Louis Eriksson, expiring contract. 36 games, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. I do think this is probably Eriksson's last year in the National Hockey League. And honestly, he's given them some good shifts. That fourth line has been interesting. They even had Eriksson, Beagle, and Roussel on a line together early on in the season, which entertained me to no end because they looked good. They looked all right. Like there was no finish, but they were playing well enough, and the defensive side, they were okay. So while the cap hit for Eriksson is egregious, and I don't think that he's going to get moved at the deadline, that they can't retain enough money to really make that work. They already got from Vancouver what they needed in terms of assets, where they got the first rounder last year and they've got a second rounder this year. They're quite happy. And they got the Eriksson contract, Ekman Larsson contract off their books. Not Eriksson Ek, he's in Minnesota. Ekman Larsson is the one that I was talking about. So Ekman Larsson, they got that contract off the books, and that was the plan there. And so they just took on a bunch of money from Vancouver, guys that they really couldn't buy out. Andrew Ladd, 37 games, 6 goals, 3 assists, 9 points. It's been nice to see him back in the NHL. He makes $5.5 million until next year. So I don't think Ladd necessarily moves either, because even though he's been in the NHL this year, and I think he's played decently, it's not worth the $5.5 million cap hit. So Ladd probably stays in Arizona through the deadline, I would think. Galchenyuk, 25 games, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points. He's had, I think it's back-to-back games he's had goals, but 7 points in 25 games. I just don't think there'll be much of a market for Galchenyuk either. But when a guy's on an expiring contract, you might be able to add that 7th-round pick they don't have currently. Stralman, 37 games, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points. He's a UFA this summer as well, and it's another contract they picked up. And just one of those, yeah, we'll do you a favor, but you got to throw us a pick, you got to throw us a prospect and all that too. and they've done that very well. So Strollman has been okay, not sensational, but he's been okay, and so he probably stays at the deadline. Fisher, 37 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. He's an RFA this summer with arbitration rates. And the $1 million cap hit is fine. Fisher's been struggling around the net, and it's too bad. He's had a lot of scoring opportunities that just aren't going in. So the 3 goals in 37 games is a sign that, the top six potential probably isn't there for him. And it's too bad because you can see the talent is there. Maybe he has a better year next year. Maybe the second half of the season we see more from him. Ilya Lyubushkin, UFA this summer, 43 games and 7 assists. I would not be surprised to see him get moved at the deadline. And I say that because I think he provides enough defensively. And on the physical side, I think there'll be some interest. I don't know how much, but I think there'll be some interest. Ryan Dzingel, he's a UFA this summer. It has not been a great year for Dzingel. 23 games, 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points. I think signing in Arizona, you get that opportunity and you might be able to bring your career back like Travis Boyd, like Gostisbehere, who was, of course, through trade. Really hasn't worked for Dzingel. So Dzingel's one of those ones, and I'm looking at all these guys in the list, I'm thinking how many of them might be out of the NHL next year. And to me, Dzingel's one of the guys that I don't know, maybe. It can be tough to figure out when a guy's career at the National Hockey League level will pause, maybe, because he's in the AHL for a year and then comes back, or what happens. Barrett Hayden, 26 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. He's an RFA this coming summer. For Hayden, it's been not the kind of year that I think he envisioned or Arizona would have envisioned for him. I still think Hayden's got some upside. I don't know how much, though. Antoine Roussel, 37 games, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. I think that there'll be a team that needs a bottom 6 forward. I think his contract means Arizona has to retain. But with how deadline cap space works, it's possible you can find a taker for Roussel. Somebody who figures they need that physicality in their bottom 6. And he can pot the odd goal here and there, and he can get some points. And I think there'll be some interest there. Dyson Mayo, who's a restricted free agent this summer, arbitration rates, 3 goals and 2 assists in 36 games. Modest totals, but I think he's played well enough for them this year. Janis Moser, 18 games, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. Moser's been good. Moser flat out has been a pretty good guy for them, and I think he's going to remain part of the team going into next year. And I'll say the same with Capo Bianco. I think there's enough upside there that he sticks around through next season. 20 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. Restricted free agent this summer with arbitration rates. Cam Dineen, 14 games, 4 assists. RFA this summer, arbitration rates. Liam O'Brien could very well fetch you a 6th or 7th. 32 games, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points, and he's the first NHLer this year to hit 10 fights. He fights, and that's the key thing. He fights. He's not the kind either that it feels like hurts you when he's not, working the physical side of the game. And so I think there'll be some interest there. Riley Nash, who of course they picked up on the waiver wire, 13 games, 2 assists, UFA this summer. Wouldn't be all that surprised to see Nash moved at the deadline. Again, that 7th round pick they don't have. Some of the guys on this board could give them a few 7th round picks, maybe even a 6th. Dmitry Ashkin, which is still to me the most odd signing at all this past offseason. He's a UFA this coming summer. He has 1 assist in 12 games. I still do not understand why they gave him $3.2 million. I understand they have the cap space. I understand that this is a team that was looking for maybe a little bit of scoring, and he was doing that in the KHL. But Yashkin never showed in the NHL at any stage that he was going to be a scorer, and it just didn't work this year. So, and I know there's injury stuff too, but yeah, for him, 1 assist in 12 games. Timmins, just the 6 games. Soderstrom, 13 games, no points for him, same as Timmins. Kolyachanik, 4 games, no points for them. And again, this is about, having those youth players. Soderstrom and Kolyachanik may very well find themselves in the mix for next season. Then you get into the goaltenders. Vejmelka, 6-18-1, 903 save percentage. He's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights this summer. Apparently, team not willing to move on from him at this stage, wanting to hold on to him into next season. It will be interesting to see what happens The 903 save percentage is odd because we've seen some games where he's had fantastic nights. He does have those rough nights as well. And it feels to me like he's one of those goalies that needs the extra shots and needs lots of shots. So Vejmelka's pretty unpredictable. Wedgwood can be too. 5-9-2, 903 save percentage since returning to Arizona. He's a UFA this summer. There might be some interest, I would think, on both sides in keeping him around. Like, Wedgwood and Vejmelka's not going to set the world on fire if they go with that as their tandem into next season. But I don't think they're expecting playoffs next season. They certainly have room on their roster to go out and get a whole bunch of players if they want, and they have the cap space to go out and get a whole bunch of players if they want. That's where it's going to be interesting to see how much patience they show and how they get to the floor next year. Do they take on more bad contracts and add more draft picks as a result? How many years can you do that? Because, again, you're trying to also make sure that the market you're playing in Arizona is supportive of the team and that works, right? Hutton, 0-2, 741 save percentage. He's a UFA this summer. I don't think Carter Hutton has value right now. Prosvetov, 0-1-1 with an 893 save percentage, restricted free agent this summer. Does Prosvetov get a shot at a top 2 job next year? If he does, that might put Wedgwood's spot in jeopardy. Or does Arizona go out looking for a goalie this summer? Because that's where it's going to be interesting. Like I said, it's easy to tear it down. It's easy to just trade everybody out. You know, like, okay, we're going to get rid of Garland, and we're going to throw OEL in there with them, and we're going to move Dvorak, and we're going to let these guys go. But then there's how do you bring guys in? How do you sell a UFA on Arizona right now as a destination? And with everything on the ice being as it is, and then you have the off-ice stuff too, the distractions of what's going on with the building. Are you going to build one in Tempe or not? So you're out of Glendale. These are questions that I would think any UFA would have to have answers to before they'd agree to necessarily come to Arizona. But again, there may be some that would say it's fine, it'll work itself out. They gave me the best offer. But is Arizona going to be in a position to be giving out best offers this summer? So I think that they're taking an interesting approach to this. It'll be fascinating to see how it turns out, how many extra draft picks they add at the deadline. I'll ballpark like 4. I'll ballpark they get 4 more draft picks for this year's draft, and maybe 5 or 6 for drafts after this one, 2023, 2024, and maybe even 2025, right? Maybe they look that far out. But I think this is envisioned as that year that you bottom out. Next year, things should get a little bit better, which might bump some of these guys out of the positions they're in right now. But I'd be interested to know what you think in the comment section below regarding the Arizona Coyotes and what they're building, and how smartly you think they're going about this, and how many years it's going to take before we see them back in contention for a playoff spot. And, you know, can they get there? And how much better could they be next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. And of course, the obligatory post about how they're just waiting for Austin Matthews' contract to end in Toronto, because that's always out there. That's always a discussion on a lot of different sites. I don't weigh in on that because there's, to me, until we get to that point, there's just as much a chance that Matthews at the end of it says, I want to stay in Toronto, and he signs and stays there. So we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.